towards the end of my career, I spent some time traveling around the country for my professional organizations, talking about what we did and what we were doing in Madison. People would come up to me afterwards and say, "Oh, our police department isn't like that at all." And I used to quip, kind of. So, I'd say, "Well, you got to understand that you deserve the kind of police department you've got." So what I'm saying is that we don't deserve this. We don't deserve what's happened. So I want to thank you for coming here today and supporting good policing. That's what it's all about. It's not anti-police. It's supporting good. It's supporting good police.
You were hired.
I was saying thank you for coming here today for supporting good policing. This isn't being anti-police. This is supporting good policing. And I do this today because I have tried to say, well, why are you talking behind Chief Koval's back? You should talk to him. And I have repeatedly tried to do that. So I don't come before here with my comments, not having made an attempt to, on numerous times, to contact Chief Koval, who doesn't want to meet with me. Secondly, community-oriented policing is exactly what it says. It is for the community. It isn't about policing setting the standards. You set the standards. That's the power of community-oriented policing. And you determine the propriety and also the legitimacy of police policies, operations, and tactics. And I also come before you today to speak as a father of two daughters of color. The reluctance of good cops to, over the years, to correct the bad behavior and criticize the bad cops who will continue to disrespect people and use excessive force keeps police effectively in the dark ages. They really can't progress as long as they can't talk with one another about what's working, what works best for the community, and how do we improve that which we do. So these behaviors of bad policing, however infrequently they may occur, or whatever small percentage they may occur in the hundreds and thousands of police contacts, perhaps, that go on in the Dane County area, all it takes is one. It only takes one to erode the effort of police to rebuild trust and support in their communities. It impedes their growth, it impedes their improvement and their effectiveness. So why has this happened? For a number of reasons, not the least of which was the shift of our nation's police towards militarization and a warrior mentality Chris Taylor talked about. Around our country, citizens have witnessed video accounts of police shootings of unarmed men and women, and many cried out, why did the police have to kill them? And that is a legitimate question. And simply stated, the Graham standard in Graham v. Connor, a 1989 decision, by the way, allows police who feel threatened to use whatever force they need to assuage that fear, and that is too low a standard. And that is why that standard is being used. You see terrible police shootings, you see the district attorney having to use that standard, and you see this whole thing continue to backslide because you say that looks like it's unjust, yet our system is unable to do something about that. So I think our community has been through enough pain and grief and turmoil surrounding the shooting of Paulie Heenan and of Tony Robinson.
Yes.
So do we want to wait for another death, another incident, another tragedy before we demand the current deadly force standard by which police are trained is to be raised? And I'm not the only voice recommending this, that the Graham standard be raised. More recently, the President's Task Force on Policing and leading police chiefs in our nation belonging to the Police Executive Research Forum, an organization which I still belong to, issued guidelines that called for raising the Graham standard and that every police department in the nation have the sanctity of life as the core of their police role. For example, police in the European... This isn't so weird, because police in the European Union must sign, the states must sign in there, that they will use deadly force only when absolute necessity, an absolute necessity for taking a person's life. But now progressive police departments throughout the nation are beginning to do that. They realize the bar must be raised if they're going to rebuild community trust and support, because if they don't do that, it's not going to be there. and they don't have trust and support, police cannot be effective, nor can they be safe in their jobs. And this means that alternative conflict management and de-escalation techniques must be taught to all police and be the first steps taken in response to disturbed or mentally ill persons.
That's right.
Must be. And, let me say this, and let me say it strong, that unless the police are willing to do this, we must demand this, and the police must comply. There's no standing back and saying this issue is non-negotiable.
Right.
Because in a free society, every issue is negotiable. Now, regarding the matter of leadership. In past years, an arrest such as Janelle's was usually confined to a few eyewitnesses. And what police had to say in their defense was accepted. And in most cases, before that day in Ferguson, and days beyond that, the community gave the police the benefit of the doubt. It was an incident that was just merely on paper. No more. No more. In most cities today, and I'm so afraid of this, that the police trust bank is being overdrawn. That there are going to be insufficient funds.
It's depleted.
If the rest of Janelle is going to be deemed legal and appropriate, then we all are in deep, deep trouble. We need to make sure that the changes in policies are made and that police operate with those standards. If not law, then regarding how our police are trained and how they're led. And that is the answer. Well, it's within the law. And then they're going to say, as the head of the state police union said, it's in keeping with our defensive tactics training. That's the way we're trained. Not acceptable. Not acceptable. So in the meantime, what has happened here is the chief has rallied around his officers performing one part, and it's an important one, that of police cheerleader. So, yes, the chief is responsible for the care, the nurturing, and the growth of those whom he leads. Yes, policing is a difficult and dangerous job, and we all must work to support their good efforts. But being a cheerleader is not the only part of a chief's job. Not it, no. The other part, and a far more important one, and a more difficult one, is to be everyone's chief.
That's right.
Everyone's chief. The chief of the community. The people's direct representative with regard to the quality of police services you receive. To make sure citizens are properly and respectfully treated. To generously listen to their feedback without getting overly defensive, even if it hurts. So both hats must be worn by a chief of police. One to support and lead police, and the other to represent, protect, and defend the interests of those whom police serve. If the chief fails to do this, persons in the community most vulnerable to police action are helpless in the face of police power. Too often, chiefs forget this. Now back to the Easttown video. I'm sure you've all seen this. You all have an opinion. We see knee strikes, we see multiple taser applications, and a bag put over a young woman's head. Her resistance was broken down, she was finally handcuffed and subdued. These techniques may be taught with regard to what's best for police, right? This way we can protect ourselves. We'll take them down, we'll bounce them on the pavement. But what about the community? What's best for you? And what's best for those in the community who have been historically abused by the police and have a tendency to mistrust them? So without trust and support, police cannot be effective, and their work can become dangerous in neighborhoods that become uncooperative and hostile to them. So how does the arrest in question look to those in the community with whom the police are trying to build trust and support? Who should analyze the potential effects of these and other various police tactics? Should they be used against women and teenagers? What about pregnant women? Who should determine whether a potentially effective tactic is appropriate? Something deemed to be lawful, but not the right thing to do. The person who determines this is, of course, the chief. And in the face of his inaction or inability to do this, it's the mayor, the Police and Fire Commission, and the Common Council that needs to step in. reasonable. We're an educated, cosmopolitan city. So I think it's reasonable to expect that a police department that has historically been thought of itself as being world-class would be able to act with a minimum amount of force and be led by a chief who is bold enough to comfortably wear the two hats. Now, what could the officers have done? Heard that a lot. Well, what do they do? I mean, look at it. Well, they could have allowed time for things to settle down, right? Just slow things down. They could have held Janelle in an office within the shopping center until she calmed down. They could have called for a supervisor, or perhaps a female officer of color,
Thank you.
to help before they attempted to move her from the shopping center. And they also could have done this, and I know police will shirk at this and say, oh, no, no, no. They could have let her go, got a warrant, and arrested her illegally. Right? So, Madison, we didn't need to have another police racial event, because each one is cumulative and disruptive. And if this one is not thoroughly resolved, the probability of another occurring is quite high. And what the chief needs to do is actively reassure the entire community, and especially our sisters and brothers of color that this will not happen again. We need to have his word and why it will not happen again. And let me say this, that it's never appropriate for the chief to be angry, sarcastic, or bullying. That's what he gets paid for.
Yes.
And if he can't take the heat, he should get the heck out of the kitchen. So the question I have, does the chief's public emotional display on his blog and at the June 6th council meeting send a bad signal to some of his officers? If the chief doesn't have to be emotionally controlled and sensitive to others, maybe they don't either. And it will remain that in the future the chief must listen without getting angry or defensive. It may mean that action must be taken. That others would come in, maybe the mayor and the president of the Police and Fire Commission, give him a coaching staff so that he understands the wearing of the two hats. So no matter what, corrective action must be taken, and what is being done shared with the community. And this must happen quickly. On September 16th, down at the University of Wisconsin in Platteville, we are having our second annual conference on 21st century policing. Mark your calendars. I invite you to be there. We hope it'll be another opportunity, as it was last year, for police and community leaders to sit down around the table and talk to one another about what needs to happen. And that we can come together and we can raise the standard of policing in Madison and across Wisconsin and across the nation. So in the meantime, yes, I'm available to help in any way I can. I ask you to take a look at my blog on WordPress called Improving Police. These, unfortunately, are only a small excerpt from a much larger paper, and I thank you for listening to me, and let us press on together.